Welcome back to the program. So we're going to be starting off with a second and yet another look at the budget, because we've had series of segments to scrutinize the budget in the recent past, particularly because it's the start of the year and it's very good time to set an agenda for the 2025 budget. Of course, we'll try to bring you yet again the conversation on the Lagos impeachment. But let's start with the budget, which with many concerns, about a huge chunk of the budget that will be financed through debt servicing. So joining us this morning to look at the budget is Mr. Azeez Olatoye, who is the Vice Chairman, Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria. We'll also be having Professor Ibrahim Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship and Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic, Kaduna State University. But we'll begin with Mr. Azeez Olatoye on the program. Mr. Azeez, let's start by looking at commencement of budget defense by ministries and parastatals at the National Assembly, for which quite a number of findings have been made. For instance, JAM has been making presentations, and the National Assembly members have been wondering why in the first place should government continue to fund the institution if it is making some remittances back, and some of the spendings of the institution cannot be justified. If we started with that, for instance, and take a look at other agencies of government that have been presenting defense for their own 2025 allocation, what are your thoughts in terms of what allocations should be going to certain agencies and others that shouldn't even have as much allocation as they should?
Okay, thanks very much for having me again this morning on this program, and good morning to all Nigerians and all viewers worldwide. I think the major challenge in the budget details, as it is said that usually devil is in the details, but I would say angel is in the details when we look at those details. So there are two major issues I think we need to focus on. The first one is the quality, of the budget, and the other one is the effectiveness, of the budget. And these are the measurements that people will be looking at. That okay, we are budgeting these amounts for this expenditure. Will this amount, be commensurate to the quality we will be expecting from the spending? And that is one of the major issue in terms of the quality of the expenditure. For instance, if let's say 100% is budgeted for an expenditure, ordinarily there will be an expectation that this amount is actually commensurate with a similar amount spent on a similar project. But where an amount is delivering like 1/3 of the amount spent on the expenditure on the project, for example, then one will be wondering. For instance, I know in the past people have a lot of experience to juxtapose. If you look at the project in Nigeria, for example, you compare it with another country like Qatar, like maybe a gas project, for example, you will see that what is spent in Nigeria is almost 3 times what is spent in other country, like on a gas project. And why is that so? Because there are a number of ineffective payments that doesn't add value to those projects. And some of these ministries, they have to package all those things into the budget. And this is where the challenge is coming from. And so ordinarily when people look at it, then it's not going to be commensurate. So this is an area that we need to look at. For example, if a budget is submitted in Nigeria, the assumption is that, look, there are some other payments that will go in there for the budget really to deliver on that project. The other one is that there are a number of interests, that will be conflicting in respect of that, project. So where such an estimate is presented and is approved, at the end of the day, you have where somebody is very strict and he controls the expenditure, there is going to be refund in some areas. In most areas, there will be no refund because people will say, oh, it's already been budgeted for. Let's just find a way of spending it. But at the end of the day, when you measure the performance vis-a-vis the amount that was spent, you cannot actually, say that this amount is spent for this project. For instance, we've been talking about maintenance, turnaround maintenance in this country for years, for which billions are going to be spent for that maintenance of a refinery. And no barrel is going to be refined. And all these expenditures will go down the drain. So people will keep talking. So the expectation this time around is that we should have a quality budget where the budget actually is productive. So it's more about the quality of the budget in terms of the productivity of what the budget, is actually spent on. I've broken it down, avoiding as much technical jargon as possible so that we can see exactly what the concern of people, and it's so unclear in some areas that, okay, we said we want to spend X amount. The issue is that what are we expecting? So the expectation of the people in most cases, are not being met based on the budget quantum. And this is really the challenge that a number of people are raising on various headings. If we pick those headings and say, oh, is this what we are going to spend on this? Are we going to have, a commensurate value for the amount that is being spent? So that is the major challenge that we are discussing.
All right, Mr. Aziz, we're going to come to a line item and some of the projects here. Some things are quite funny when you look at this budget. But I want you to speak further broadly. 49.7 trillion, that's a proposal of the appropriation bill. But from the analytics I have done, for 60% of this budget is going to reputation management and recurrent operations. What I mean by that, if about 15 to 16 trillion is going to debt service, it's just to manage our reputation so that we can be able to borrow more in the future as a country, and just to show how, where the integrity of our country to be able to pay back our debt. And then issue of recurrent is about operation. So if you add 14 trillion to about 15, 16 trillion, that's about 30 trillion or 49. That's almost about 60% of the budget. How productive can a budget be when 60% is for reputation management and recurrent operations, not capital?
Correct. I talk about effectiveness broadly, and that's exactly one of the points I mean. I remember in the last time we were having this conversation, left for me, the amount budgeted for debt servicing is a huge loss, because if we are having a revenue of 36.35 trillion and we try to manage within that, and we have like a balanced budget, and we save this 14 trillion on debt servicing, or all these image, managing, then that will be value adding to our people. If we take less debt servicing, for example, I ask the question, do we really need to continue with this debt? I'm very sure the Honorable Minister of Finance and the coordinating, Minister of Economy had already said that, look, on the long run, probably this debt, we have to look into it. My own honest position, and from a very reasonable position, is that why do we have to have this debt there? And why can't we be using, PPP projects for some of that project that is leading to, debt? We've already had it in this country. Somebody cannot say, what is he talking about? That we don't need to have a debt. In 1999, during the President Obasanjo's time, he negotiated some of these debts and brought them down. To let's cancel this and use PPP for a lot of the projects. So if we use alternative funding methods, we don't have to be paying interest or debt servicing sums. These are very huge sums that are very ineffective. let the debt be given to private sectors who are really going to be productive, and that we are going to have very solid economy. If we are paying about over 14 trillion or 15 trillion in debt servicing, look at the quantum of life, the value of people that is going to raise the standard of living. Let's take additional 5 trillion to health, additional 5 trillion to education, additional 5 trillion into road infrastructure, to be specific, or into power, and the government is giving this into them. Let's compare it with giving 15 trillion to debt servicing. Who benefits from the debt servicing? Nobody. It's just, as you have rightly said, previous government have taken debt and then we have to pay for this. Yes, I know the obligation is there. Government has to honor the obligation, but we should stop increasing or going forward on this debt, because it doesn't add any value to anyone, with utmost respect. And the banks are going to do better if they are giving the debt to those who are going to utilize them. The same amount will be given to private sectors, and government is going to do a PPP, project, and they will deliver on them, because it's private sector. They will not allow the money to be spent anyhow. But this is a situation where government will take money for a project, so government will continue to pay the debt. Now we will now be squeezing the tax revenue.
Right.
We will squeeze the tax revenue from income tax, from various sources of taxes. We will then be using them to pay debts. So how does that benefit Nigerians, with utmost respect?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Latoye. Let me go to Professor Yushao Ango, who's Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship and the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Kaduna State University. Kaduna, you're welcome to the program, Prof.
It's my pleasure.
Seeing the conversation now about how we're trying to eke out revenue, either from taxation, from borrowing here and there, trying to meet a revenue target, just to fund this budget. And then you see some of the elements in that budget, and you wonder, is this the best way to spend borrowed funds, or at least the hard-earned money from Nigerians? And I'm talking about some of the issues raised by CSOs, Nigerians, economists, and I'll take this one by Mr. Ezon Yekpere, saying that some of the elements there are not priorities for spending borrowed money. Service-wide votes continue the tradition of lump sum votes for vaguely described expenditure items, which at the end of the year cannot guarantee value for money. We'll get deeper into this, but have you seen anything change about this budget, or is just the same of the same in terms of how we are spending this hard-earned money, Prof?
What we are doing, or what we have been doing sincerely for some years that I can remember, is that we seem not to be very conscious of our realities. If you remember, during the regime of General Obasanjo, we have had a situation whereby most of our Paris Club debt was actually resolved, meaning that we didn't have much debt on our neck. Now, there is nothing wrong with debt per se, but what we have done of recent, since then, is that we have been building up debt, and some of it is not to service or to provide infrastructure. Is actually to service some things that are day-to-day. Some of them, of course, they can give you a debt, especially the Bretton Woods institutions, just to cover your trade gaps, or to probably even give you a debt that will just be used basically to train, for training or some other things, very funny things. And then, meanwhile, we're building a deficit every year in, year out. There's nothing wrong with deficit, but when it is growing at a stage, at a level, as has been projected this year, and then vis-a-vis the debt servicing that is required also annually, the two of them put together are competing completely, much more than the capital expenditure that is required to drive growth. Then we have a problem, and basically we don't seem to observe or agree that we have such problems. So what we need to do as a nation, as a country, that has a problem that we're faced with is to actually look at all those frivolous expenditures that are not required and remove them. We don't have to put them there. We are just making budget to be a routine. You come in, year out. People just go and slot some amounts, into this or that. Basically, not conscious of the fact that we're building a trap. Because see, this debt servicing is going to be a major issue for us. I assure you, if we are not careful, the problem is that we'll fall into this, maybe the space that probably some countries have entered into, and then you begin to see all sorts of conditionalities given by these same bodies. I mean, they are giving us loans that are not beneficial to us. I don't have a problem with loans that are given to us that are purely for infrastructure, that go directly into infrastructure, provided, like the last speaker said, we're also using or at least applying the cost, that is competitive globally. What we have done and what I have seen is that most of our projects even are way priced well above the international average. Now, given our condition, I don't think we're doing ourselves, we're fair to ourselves, as a country, going into those and then building this problem that in a few years to come, the debt servicing vis-a-vis the deficit will catch up with us, and I don't think it will be funny.
All right. I, for good reason, I want to go back to the appropriation that has gone to agencies. And if you looked at the budget, a number of agencies that have quite a number of allocations to them. Talking about the National Agency for Science and Technology. In that mix, you also find a Bureau for Public Enterprises that are getting a chunk of the budget. I'm trying to look for the exact figure now. Jeffrey talked about productivity earlier. If you looked at, the productivity of this even past budget, what measure have they contributed such that there is a justification for the huge sums allocated to these agencies? Professor Ibrahim, that's for you.
Okay, so thank you. If we see the details, then we can say for sure what it is for. But like you said rightly, like for example, we know that Ministry of Finance Incorporated has a budget that is improved, so to say. A chunky amount has been put there, which probably is the largest in the transport sector. But we got to know that they are going to invest in one of the rail projects in Lagos. Then questions have been asked, are these going to be replicated all over? So what I'm saying is that it's when you see the details that you can see what it is for, that, for example, some of those agencies are having this. But beyond even what is there for agencies, or some agencies that look somehow funny, we also have, like has been stated over and over again, insertions and amounts that are very unnecessary. Maybe for purchase of vehicles here and there, for purchase of computers, for purchase of furniture, year in, year out. Now, if we know truly that we're in an emergency situation, I don't think this is the time to actually print our way, whatever little we have, into various transactions here and there, or into budgetary provisions here and there. And more often than not, what happens is that at the end of the year, whether or not there was need to spend those monies, towards the end of the year, you see MDAs, everybody rushing helter-skelter to ensure that they utilize the money, so that it will not, elapse, into the next year's appropriation or whatever. So basically, it is in the details that we'll know for sure what the BPE or other agencies like that have had these huge allocations to them.
Let's go to Mr. Aziz. Mr. Aziz, I want you to maybe expatiate on what Prof has said. These insertions, do you think that when budget is being prepared with the greatest sense of respect to the people who prepared this budget, it appears to some of us like a good percentage is copy and paste? Because I don't know how you have to be buying spoon every day, every year, or buying vehicle every year. It doesn't make sense. So for instance, I'm seeing in the Ministry of Works that about one of their line items here, is it like, yeah, one of the projects they are doing, or line item, whatever it's called, purchase of vehicles for SSAs 2 billion naira. And there are other purchases of maybe utility vehicles and all of. When you see all of this, how should Nigerians actually internalize some of these things? Because the same government will come out and say there's no money, there's paucity of fund, 13 trillion is going to be borrowed either from local, domestic or foreign sources, and we need to tie our belt, Nigerians need to bear with us. And then you see some of these ludicrous provisions, some of them absolutely vague. You can't, if you query it, and there's going to be a law, because sometimes people don't get that this is called a law, an appropriation act. That means if the money is available, it has to be spent. So if something is vague, it gives room for corruption.
Thank you very much. Absolutely, Prof. Had said it, and you see, by way of a very clear analysis, I think there should be a session, probably television session for budget review and critical analysis from time to time. Some of these expenditures, they are just being repeated expenditures with utmost respect for no value. But let me say that those who are preparing the budget, in most cases, they are constrained, because somebody is submitting the budget that this is what we need, and you are querying it that, okay, what about the one you bought last year, year before? All these things are assets. They are not depleted assets. Most of them are ions. So where are they? These are the questions that needs to be asked, in terms of the details that I said, angel is in the details or devil is in the details. So these are questions that needs to be asked, and we can only address this by picking each of those headings. For instance, let's pick the issue of 13 trillion. The first question is, should we incur 13 trillion based on the projected expenditure of 49 trillion expenditure budget? Should we increase 13 trillion? Let us come and discuss it. My question would be no. We shouldn't borrow for this 13 trillion. Let's look at an alternative. I know people like Prof, economists, will now come up and tell us the alternative to borrowing 13 trillion. Let's look at the project that falls into those extra. Number one, I have mentioned the issue of public-private partnership.
Mr. Aziz, my apologies for busting in. I totally agree with what you're saying. Shouldn't we start that, reviewing that deficit by looking at line item to even reduce it further before we load the gap? For instance, Ministry of Works, I just pointed it out to you, is spending 2 billion naira to buy SSAs, senior special or something like assistance to whoever, vehicles. Yeah. I also saw one of the line items, I can't remember where they are spending, not Ministry of Budget now, Ministry of Works, another ministry, spending about 300 million naira to do meetings. For God's sake, what is going on?
These are things that I absolutely agree that we need to be reviewing them on the line by line item. Let's ask the question, you want to buy, okay, 2 billion or whatever, 2 trillion, cars and whatever. Okay, where are the ones that were there before? What year were they bought? What is their status? Those who were there before, did they carry them away? Are these personal assets or their organizational assets? So we need a list of all the cars that were there before. So why are we replacing them? If we are trading them in, return them to the owner, get a new one, why should the cost be up to this? So those who have already, those who have prepared the budget, they must have done, their own work within the constraint, of what was given to them. But when it is subjected to public scrutiny, even if we don't get it right this year, I know next year, those who are preparing the budget will be able to tell His Excellencies that, look, let's be very careful here, because these things are going to be, reviewed, and all Nigerians are going to see what we are doing. We already have about 60, vehicles used by the SSA before. Where are those 61s? Now, if we just want to augment a little bit, it shouldn't be up to this. And these are the public scrutiny that we have to put into each of those expenditures. With utmost respect, if we are able to critique each of these expenditures, at the end of the day, if we don't arrive at a surplus budget, we are likely going to arrive at a balanced budget. And the issue of further, depletion through debt servicing is going to be minimal.
Right.
As I said, we reviewed the issue of debt servicing critically. We go to 1999 when the Paris Club, debt was forgiven, and part of it was paid. Can't we adopt the same strategy and look at a BOT, for example? Some of the things that government really want to fund through, the capital expenditure, let's have them. And let's look at people in the industry. All I just want is that the government will have credibility to be able to have contract with people who can do this project without breaching those contracts.
Well, let me take it to Prof now, because what we're describing for some may sound like a crime, really. Misuse of funds, profligacy in an obvious time of, dearth of funds, right? Looking through the analysis, some have said we can save as much as 1 trillion naira in this budget if some of these, exuberant spendings, repetition, spending billions for things like vehicles, as we said, vehicles that you have before. A lot of these vehicles are still working very well. Things like buildings for special advisors. You wonder, we have offices already that these people can use. In any case, how much of an office do you need? So should we maybe be talking about looking at these issues as some sort of crime against Nigeria? Because obviously we need these monies for other things and not to enrich the already rich in some cases.
You have put it correctly. This is a crime against the people of Nigeria. That is just what it is. Now, basically, I want to suggest that if there is, we can do a whole year, 2 years, 3 years, as a policy, you are not going to buy any vehicles. Now, nothing will happen. We can do 2, 3, 4, 5 years without renovating any presidential building or offices or anything, and nothing will happen. We can spend 3, 4, 5 years without buying vehicles, without this, without that. So if we are serious about our situation and we truly want to change the way we are, and we truly want to push ourselves, especially if we have to spend, let's spend on infrastructure. Let's spend on what will generate jobs. Let's spend on what will bring productivity. So we can do away with this. We can fast if it is fasting. But what is lacking is that this fasting is going on by me and you and the average Nigerian. But this fasting is not being faced on, those who are at the helm of affairs are not facing it. Why? If everybody needs to suffer for the economy to be better, I think we need to suffer all together. So that is what is missing. And in the process of this, people are feeding fat on the economy, people are making a lot of money, and the generality of Nigerians are carrying the burden. And so to me, you put it correctly when you say it's a crime. It's a crime against Nigeria. If we have to spend 1 naira more than what we need to spend, if we have to spend where we don't need to spend, and when we have a situation as we have challenges of revenue, we have challenges of meeting up with infrastructure, we have deficit in infrastructure base, so we need to push that, not to be servicing debts or other things. We need to come up with structures that will favor Nigeria. My co-presenter also said something about PPP. There are many other options. We can, for example, capitalize the NNPC, and take it to the market. We get a little percentage of it. It will cover a lot of this infrastructure we need. We don't have to go borrowing. There are many things we can do. We can do build, operate, and transfer like you suggested. We can do many things, but we can actually fast. What I mean fast, quote and unquote, in terms of these luxuries, these flimsy things, furniture, vehicles. We can put a stop for 3 years and nothing will happen. And that just to me would be something like, okay, the masses are suffering. We also that are there at the helm of affairs are also aligning with them, are going along with them. We're not changing any vehicles. We're not buying any more aircrafts. We're not buying any more yachts. We're not doing any, so that, you show that you are also with the people, in terms of their suffering. And I think we need to do this. If we do that, then definitely what will happen is that when we're very prudent, then we don't have so much deficit, because that what we call deficit may not even be there. Because the problem of deficit is that we are going to borrow money to finance it. We don't have to borrow more money. Let us manage with what we have. Then wherever we need to borrow, then let it be for infrastructure, nothing else. And wherever we can finance infrastructure through BOT, that is transparent, that is, or through some other means, let's do it. Let's capitalize and take some of these critical assets to the market, and then in that sense, we're not borrowing. We're actually, investing our hard, our investment. Are using a process from our investment, into our infrastructure base. That is what is happening somewhat to Aramco, Saudi Aramco. That was valued at about $2 trillion. And automatically that brings a lot of money to the country when you do that, and then you can actually invest significant portion of it into infrastructure in particular, which will bring productivity, especially power, energy, transportation, especially rails and things like that. So that is what we need to do, but we should not be having deficit out of what actually is frivolous, that we can do away with and nothing will happen. Nobody will feel anything about it, and there will not be anything lost. That is my suggestion.
All right. It feels like a vicious cycle, really, if you consider that, time and again we have similar conversations around repetitions in the budget, needless introductions, even sometimes, budget padding as alleged by members of the National Assembly, which also do not lead anywhere. And we wonder if the members of the National Assembly are scrutinizing the budget right now with the objective, with the goal of reducing all of those repetitions, rather than ensuring that the budget meets the right cycle of January to December. But clearly it's an ongoing conversation, and that's why we will continue to look at them. I want to thank you very much, gentlemen. Professor Ibrahim Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic, Kaduna State University. Also joining us on this conversation is Mr. Aziz Olatoye, Vice Chairman, Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for Olatoye. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.